Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships, where today I'm going to showcase the Cerberus. It's the Tier 10 Commonwealth Tech Tree Tier 10 Heavy Cruiser here in the game, and talk a little bit about her playstyle and then also just consumables as a whole. So I have, this is the longest of the three battles I'm going to show you. The others are, I think, more shorter clips, and I try to cut out some of the lulls. But essentially, the Cerberus is a passive cruiser. I talked about it rather recently in a video this past week when I had a games I was featuring Cerberus in the mix of Petropavlovsk about awareness with cruisers. And essentially, I called Cerberus, probably in terms of the tech tree tier 10 heavy cruisers, it's the most passive of the heavy cruisers in the game. Maybe there's some other premium cruisers that could take the slot for most passive, but Cerberus definitely is. She plays mid to long range in the game. You can get the 54,400 hit points with Survivability Expert, which I don't have. I have like a 16, 17 point commander. I've gone for some other things in the meantime rather than the hit points at this point in time, but we'll soon get that fixed. So what you have with Cerberus is an interesting boat. She has a lot of consumables, not the ones for, let's say, necessarily spotting, like, you don't have a radar and whatnot, of course. But what she gets is kind of this combination where she's not an AA cruiser. She focuses more on the opposite side of the spectrum, being submarines, with the submarine surveillance skill, which can spot enemy subs up to, I think it's 8 kilometers away. Paired also with a 5-kilometer hydroacoustic search. And then with your crawling smoke generator, as you see going. So we actually get over 2 minutes, I think 134 seconds. And with a 2-point commander skill, you can bump that up to over 140 something. So this is kind of the passive playstyle of Cerberus, where when the game starts, you push in a little bit, and then you just go into this kiting mode. This game's going to be a little bit frustrating because ultimately what ends up happening here isn't good. So being really reliant on Smallland, as he's getting the torpedo warning on his end. Torps are coming, but he's reversing away. He's tunnel visioned and ignores the torpedo indicator and burp, gets torped by Shimakaze. I was kind of expecting him to be a bit more aggressive earlier on sea and radaring the Holland, and I don't actually remember if he ever did radar or not. But what happens here is we lose spotting for the most part. We're going to be able to shoot some ships, but you can see, we have I think it's a Vermont that's up on the D10 line. Another battleship kiting out, he's F10, and then we have a Golden Lion, and he's H10. So a lot of passiveness, which means if I get spotted right now, when you're looking at the mini-map and the ships before us, like, I'm going to be focused the most. But you see this movement of enemy team is moving towards A, more away from C. So after the Schlieffing goes down, it's going to be a bit more of what do you call it? I don't remember the name of it. I don't remember. We're going to go a bit of hunger season. Famine, that's what I'm looking for. Famine. The longer I live in Norway, I don't use these English words, the more difficult it gets. Because ultimately, a Cerberus, it's a farming passive cruiser. When you go for the full fire chance build, it's 21% between your 2-point commander skill and then taking the combat signals. So I think we run like a 9.2 second reload time, because we go for main battery mod 3 in the 6th slot. So you do set a lot of fires ultimately. Like there's another game where I'm shooting a Schlieffen and I'm just basically making him burn through all of his fast damage control teams. They don't last long, and they have a shorter duration but a fast reload time. So you have this ability where if you position yourself well, you can overwhelm like battleships and cruisers, repair parties, damage control parties, long term, and end up, essentially putting them out of the game. So now we're in this situation. I think the Marcel actually came all the way from Alpha, and he's kiting as well, and that's not the time to kite as a destroyer, that we need him to go cap. So essentially, now we're in the unfavorable position. We have to push in Cerberus. You know, our hydro is about to come off a cooldown. I think we have 110-second action time on the hydro. But Holland torps, they don't hit hard, but they're very fast, so we don't have a lot of reaction time. So Holland's just going to torp like both sides of this island. You know, so a lot of players end up, you know, back here behind this little island, more so than perhaps the island on the other spawn. Because the other flank is collapsing, so it's the pressure. We're already behind in terms of just getting up onto C. This isn't really good for us at this point in time. So I'm just going to ping the map saying that the Holland is a little bit closer because he's detecting me. It'll be a pain if the Holland decides to go out wide, which ultimately I think the Golden Lion goes wide to prevent that from happening, and the Marceau ends up ultimately hunting him down. But with the 18-kilometer gun range of these 12 203s, the Yoshino is going to be working to try to get away. So we're trying to push in towards him, but I can't just full go bow onto him because I want to be able to have more of a reaction time to Holland's torpedoes. So honestly, I should probably just go ahead and be using them now, or using my header now, so we do get it off, because I'm kind of trying to get a good idea of when Holland's probably going to get torpedoes back up, and so I do have a good timing. And then I'm worried, though, I have to turn into the torpedoes. If Yoshino, if he's, you know, ambitious enough, he could easily wreck us, whether it's his high explosive or especially the armor piercing. So what's really lacking on the ship in terms of why it makes it such a passive mid-range to long-range cruiser is because of the armor scheme. So, like, for example, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but if you go up to, like, Salem, Des Moines, they have a 27mm bow and stern. Here you have a 25mm. The midsection side armor plating is 32, and then the deck and the midsection is 30. So like even some of the Dutch airstrikes will easily pin you. So you'll kind of see an example of that coming up towards the end of this game when we have to deal with the Utrecht. And you have a pretty big citadel. You get a little bit of torque protection, but it's honestly it's not a lot. And then, so it's like a 30mm, but yeah, then it's 152. You have a small like 152 armor belt line as well. So you just take a lot of damage in this boat. I mean, it goes for a lot of the cruisers at the high tier that have more of a soft armor scheme. Anything above 300 or 358mm main battery guns or higher overmatches the 25mm. So, you know, we're in a game, state of the game now where there's a lot of, you know, I mean, of course there's a lot of 406s, but then like you have 457s, 460s, was it 483 or something, and 510s. So like, you know, here this sucks because we were focusing so much on getting Shimakaze, that the Vermont with his decently good conceal kind of went wide out the gap, and gets, I think, 2 citadels on us with some pins, so it's very close to being a dev strike. So that's not good for us. Sometimes you have to be mindful when you're using the smoke screen. It can give you this false sense of security. So for example, if the Des Moines gets a little bit more closer, he can just radar and spot me, and then they could both just knock me out of the game here. So I decide that it'd be better for me to take the chance of just going to go ahead and accelerate forward and turn out. So rather than trying to reverse out of a radar if Des Moines decides to kind of push, but stepping out of the smoke here, we get some intelligence to see what's happening. We're going to shift our focus to Napoli, which is a very tanky boat. And we end up utilizing the high explosive a little too long here, because I expect once I fire on him, like he's going to just like maybe angle more in towards us or something like that, or angle and turn out away. And I thought, oh, is he gonna run now? He's turning away, and I think he's just trying to get torpedoes off, and then he comes back more bow in towards the 2 friendlies up on the 9-10 line. So then we're going to switch to armor piercing, because ultimately you're going to see like a combination of non-pins, and then we're trying to also set fires, of course, but ultimately we need the armor piercing to deal with Napoli. So we're going to switch here in just a moment. Yeah, after this salvo. Because you don't want to sleep on the armor piercing. In one sense, like, it's funny I get later to the end of the game where I should have stuck with high explosive and not armor piercing. So we have to lead him well, because Napoli also has a decent amount of speed, because as long as this Napoli is alive, it locks up our team up on the 9-10 line. So that first salvo wasn't a lot. This salvo is going to be much more when the shells connect. Yeah, so ultimately it's the fire that kills him, but we took like a 7,000 chunk out of him. And we had these 13.5 kilometer torpedoes, so we're going to be torping the gap a lot. So if I would have waited a tiny bit longer, maybe it could have been Des Moines had his hydro up. We could have possibly landed a torp here, but I'm going to use that island right there. Because I did live commentary when I recorded this video, but there was a little small child outside of where I live. It was being very loud, and then my clicky keyboard annoyed me a lot when I listened to post recording. So we don't have to use a smoke here. I mean, granted, we don't have one in Nihao. And I get this feeling that Des Moines is going to go broadside, so I'm going to end up switching to armor piercing. Like gun feeder would actually probably be pretty nice on this boat. I don't have it. Ultimately, I don't know if the full build I go for will. So we switched back to high explosive, and honestly, I should have already caught on that I don't have gun feeder here. I'm just really used to it because, you know, when you have the 203s, you know, they're pretty vicious for broadside cruisers. It has heavy cruisers, battle cruisers, even battleships. So now I'm pretty confident that I can get rid of the Des Moines because I want the Golden Line to live. Like, that's pretty vital if we're going to have a chance here. So we get 3 Citadels and take him out, but the Utrecht has been farming him and just making the Golden Line's life really miserable, so he gets taken out there. And then we're going to be farming some shots over the island on the Vermont. You know, it's difficult with the Vermont because of his 40-second cooldown as heals, and our Vermont is pushed up onto the B10 because he's dealing with a submarine. So it's just slow, painful torture for the Vermont. Here is where I end up making a mistake. I'm kind of thinking, oh, let me use the armor piercing because I've had good results with it so far. Utrecht is such a light cruiser that honestly it's not needed. Like, we'll still do a lot of damage to him even with high explosive loaded. So that's kind of disappointing. I was turning more to get ready in case the Utrecht decided to come around, and he did. So now I'm going to switch back to high explosive here. You know, the one disadvantage here is if our Vermont dies, the other enemy Vermont will probably switch his focus back to me. So I had to move, re-accelerate here, try to see if I can just sidestep the airstrike. You know, with Utrecht, he has such a fast reload time on his airstrike that we have to be mindful here. And I try to use this last AP salvo to take out maybe a main battery turret. That's the other thing with Cerberus. Like, you only have 25mm on the main battery gun, so even Utrecht's like lighter caliber cruiser guns, he ends up knocking out one of our main battery guns, which is like really frustrating. Like here, so I have to use a DCP, and you can see we're doing like a decent enough damage being bow on, but because of our armor scheme, like Utrecht with the high explosive bombers is able to just kind of completely crush us. And I didn't want to close the gap so fast. That's why I was going so slow to begin with, because I didn't want Utrecht to ram, like trying to get the kill there. So it's essentially a rinse and repeat. So what's going to happen here? We get so far down, and then we want to turn and kite position. This game's going to be the opposite in the sense that we actually had, I think I had 3 games in a row. Or 2 in a row with the submarine, the SEAL here. And then I think 3 in a row with the Herculeo, and they are like really good. They just wreck whatever I end up trying to go for. I mean, of course, we still help out the submarine here. Like, that's the thing when you kind of set out playing this mid-range style, because you don't, have like a 10-kilometer radar or something like that. I'm trying to support both the sub and the DD who's moving towards D, but for now the focus will be the SEAL. The fun thing with the Cerberus is the airstrike. So I don't know if I already said it already or it was one of the past recordings. Like, Cerberus isn't an AA cruiser. Like, it's not really meant to deal with CV. She's meant to deal with submarines, right? So you have the 8-kilometer submarine surveillance range as we slowly reverse in. And we get 3 depth charge airstrikes, which is hard to remember because honestly I always keep thinking I have 2. But we get 3. So I only used 2 there. Like, I should have actually went ahead and popped a 3rd. And then I'm like, I was looking and reviewing it over. So what ends up happening a lot sometimes with DD players is that they stumble across a submarine and then they think, I I need to suicide and kill myself in an attempt to kill the submarine, which is exactly what the Shimakaze is going to do here. So I'm just like noting, looking around, be paying attention to any oil slicks from the enemy sub or possible, which we do see one there, or like pings. We get lucky sometimes with our airstrikes. So here the Shimakaze decides to do, just as I said, he's going to suicide in. So he kills the throttle, turns in, and we're going to take a blind shot here. We get a direct hit on the sub. So again, we're going to try to drop an airstrike roughly where he is. We get 7 shells connected there, even though he went more Bowen. And then the Hikiryu takes him out. So that's great. So it's opening things up on our flank. It's a big difference when you have competent submarine or DD players on your flank in front of you. Like, I disagree with the Wilds Wiki article. It talks about how Cerberus can function independently. I mean, perhaps it can function independently with like a player who's like quite competent and knows what they're doing. But I think on average, I don't really see Cerberus as being the ship that can operate independently. If you're not with your team, you tend to suffer for the most part, especially like if you, let's say your team quote unquote wins a flank, right? You push a new team back, your teammates get disinterested, then they go like, let's say to mid, and then the enemy battleships or cruisers you had pushed away on the flank, they re-engage on that same flank. Well, you and the Cerberus aren't going to stop them because one is like your armor scheme. You're going to get easily wrecked. Then or it's a destroyer that's spotting you and you can't go dark. I had another game on this map after this one, where there's a submarine that went down to the J line, and then was going into our spawn. And I was sitting on the island right where I'm aiming at. And I really couldn't do a lot. So that ultimately sucked. So it's not an independent ship, in my opinion. Like, if your team moves mid, you move with team. Here, there can be quite the challenge where a lot of cruiser players, I think, can be quite tempted to move up to the gap directly ahead of me, where you have a lot of camping behind those islands, as I pointed out with my mouse clicker there. So it's best to just kind of sit in this kiting position, because if you go too far forward, whether it's a submarine or to DD that spots you, you can't guarantee that you can slow down fast enough and get the smoke screen covering you in this scenario. So it's just best to be more in this kiting in waiting stance. Again, we want to try to support our sub. Elbing, which, for all intents and purposes is just a cruiser, not really a destroyer. So we're going to get a shot off there, and then I am going to go ahead and smoke up. The ships like Cerberus, I mean, most cruisers in the game, they tend to do better in the last half of the battle, so to speak, because maybe you don't have as many battleships to shoot at you and overmatching your armor scheme, where you're really having to just be mindful of your positioning a lot and have a lot of awareness. Like, it begins to be less stressful on you. And another thing I haven't really talked about was the torps. So I think they have like a 96-second reload. If you don't build into them, they do a 13.5 kilometer range. So you are spamming them now and then with the Adrenaline Rush. I've had them down to 86, 85. If you take fill the tubes, you can get them to 86, and then you'd be underneath 80 with the Adrenaline Rush. Which honestly, the torpedoes aren't worth building into. Like Brisbane, as an example, like you want to build into the torps. Fill the tubes, I'm pretty sure, on Brisbane, because she just really excels at that role. But this game is, like commenting, it's a lot better because I actually have a lot more targets to farm, and our team's kind of, they're positioned in mid back in our spawn, but actually the Goliath this game is, I think, the most aggressive Goliath I've ever seen in World of Warships. So we'll run into him later. And this is a Schlieffen we end up farming a lot, trying to set fires on him, make him burn through his repair parties, his fast damage control teams. With our 203s high explosive, as long as we're hitting that rough midsection of the ship, we can also incapacitate his torpedoes. We're also permanently incapacitating AA guns as well. Not that there's, I don't think this game had any hybrids, and we don't have any CVs right now. So he's trying to reverse back, so we put him on fire there. So I think he ends up DCPing here, then we're just going to reignite him again. It would have been better if he could have waited till he got back in behind the island and not had the... versus just allowing me to set him on fire, because there's only like a 10-second duration or something like that on the fast damage control teams that like Schlieffen, Prince Ruprecht, that line gets. So then this enables us to just farm more damage out of him ultimately. Our Elbing won't be alive, I don't think, too much longer. You know, he loses the spotting game with the Shimakaze on the flank, and then if he just ends up sitting there broadside in the smoke, you know, of course he can farm decent damage on broadside Bungo and Schlieffen, but he's not set up to deal with it. So we're going to keep working this position. We're trying to figure out what's going on with the Goliath. Goliath is being pretty aggressive. We don't have anyone on the team to punish the Goliath for moving up where he has. I get spotted here by, I think it's the Utrecht, and so Bungo's going to take a shot at us. So rather than panicking and accelerating forward, I was looking to see that. I decided let's just try to reverse if we can. And it's really close. If we had accelerated, probably would have eaten the Citadels there. Here, the Goliath just showcasing the AP again, which we switched to. We're going to get a 20k salvo in on the Goliath. So I know I'm going to get spotted if I just continue to sit there. And so I decide I want to accelerate forward, and I can kind of spin out and angle my armor for Bungo, because Bungo doesn't like us this game because we farm him a decent amount. So here you're going to see Citadels, and we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So we went from like 58k to 79k. We still have our Elbing alive, and it's kind of dumb. The submarine panics, and he starts calling on me and the Conqueror to help him out. And the submarine player just completely lacks awareness. Like, the Goliath has been approaching him for like the last 2 minutes. And he's like, oh my, I'm caught out by the hydroacoustic search of the Goliath. I didn't know that was going to happen to me, right? So like here I'm like, I'm pretty sure Goliath has hydro. I'm like, yeah, like you're pretty stupid. Or, I mean, I can say it, like if you take Goliath and you take AA Expert, you're pretty dumb, in all fairness. Like there's so many much torpedoes in the game, like a lot more value of the hydroacoustic search and defensive AA than on Goliath. You know, Goliath is probably could be considered the other heavy cruiser of the game that is also passive. But you can be even more passive in Cerberus just because you have a smoke screen that you're not risking yourself as much. It's not as not as high-paced tempo with Cerberus versus Goliath. And here we angled our armor just in time. Part of it is we wanted to bait him to shoot us before I smoked up, so the smoke fire penalty would still have him revealed. The Utrecht and the Shimakaze are going to come down the line. And then we're going to have to deal with them, and ultimately we just get wrecked by the Kremlin that comes into back in our spawn like 19 kilometers away with his 457. So I'm just going to wrap up the video now. I'll do an upgrade commander build video on Cerberus tomorrow. I'll kind of highlight, I'll show you the build I'm going for, of course, but it'll probably be, I don't know if there's one, maybe two other builds you could do. Ultimately, you know, the party trick of Cerberus is it does really well against subs, and it farms battleships, right? Like now Wargaming is putting like giving you the ability that you can just farm battleships, cruisers for over 2 minutes in the smoke screen at like no recourse. You know, if there's nothing within your 7.3 smoke fire penalty range, I think is what it is for Cerberus. So it's just really dumb in my opinion, because you know, it's not exciting to battleship players to have to deal with it, but on the other hand, once Cerberus gets spotted, like you can easily wreck the Cerberus just as the Vermont did to me earlier, and the Kremlin does later at the end of this game. So anyhow, with that being said, if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.